Hey guys, welcome back. So with this one, we have reached the conclusion of Peter David's 2023 Joe Fixit series, which has taken us back to the early Joe Fixit days and given us a brand new story, which fits right between the existing stories that we've known and loved. And now in the conclusion, with all the conflict that we've seen build up throughout this series, it all makes its way to the Coliseum for the grand finale. And with that said, let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so jumping back in, it's here where everything is led to the huge final showdown with all the different players throughout this series under one roof at the Coliseum Casino, with Joe Fixit fighting Rhino and the Kingpin. Spider-Man and Electro are here, as well as Count Nefaria and his team of goons who really don't care for anybody out here who ain't from here. So they don't care for Joe Fixit, for Spider-Man, Electro, Rhino, or Wilson Fisk. And when these guys get here, right off the bat, Count Nefaria, he starts letting off shots on Wilson Fisk, who he knows is anything but bulletproof. But when this happens, Rhino jumps in like he's Wonder Woman, and he parries the bullets right back at Count Nefaria. And let me tell you, when I saw this, the first thing I thought was like, Rhino's really out here moving like he from Themyscira. Never thought I'd see the day that Rhino became Wonder Woman, but here we are. And it's kind of terrifying thinking of Rhino moving that fast. But with Count Nefaria down, he tells his team to go get him. And the first guy we see step up is Masked Marauder, who attempts to use his Opti Blast on Spider-Man, which can temporarily blind its subjects. But it's here where Spider-Man uses a bit of advice that he had got from Daredevil, which was just to close his eyes and let his spider sense lead the way. And with Spider-Man going up against the Masked Marauder with his eyes closed, it's still a mismatch in Spidey's favor. And then after this, Hydro Man then makes his move, and really out of everyone here, I'd have to say Hydro Man is probably in the top 2 as far as people that Joe and Spidey need to be concerned about in this all-out brawl. Because Hydro Man's one of those guys who gets slept on a lot, but depending on the situation, whether he has more water to work with, or even after his upgrade of getting hydrokinesis, which allowed him to control water outside of himself, and all things considered, you can see how Hydro Man could become a problem, whether he has more water to work with, or even if it's just him, because water hits hard and it's very difficult to hit back. But just after Hydro Man splashes Joe, Whiplash then steps in with a quite clever attack, with him catching Joe drenched and off balance with his electric charged whip. And it's here where he shows an example of working with your teammates and using their abilities to your advantage, because when he does this, it literally knocks Joe out, causing him then to fall flat under the water. But with Peter seeing this and knowing that you can't leave a Hulk in the tub unattended, he then takes to the roof of the casino floor, webs Joe and pulls him out of the water. And Peter even admits that Joe's a bit heavy, like the man is dense, but no one here really understands that, as well as the ceiling, which gave out under Peter's feet and sent him falling right into the hands of Wilson Fisk. And in this moment where the two of them have a bit of brief and awkward eye contact, they more or less come to the agreement that neither one of them speaks of this moment ever again. But then just after this, we get this moment where Whiplash, who at this point, I'll admit, he's on a bit of a roll. He just took down Joe Fixit, he's gassing himself at the moment. But when he then takes his whip and tries to go after Wilson Fisk, only for it then to get caught by Electro. And really it's here where Whiplash, he should have just let the thing go. But nope, instead, he attempted to shock Electro, which quite literally was the dumbest move that Whiplash could have made. And I wouldn't be surprised if he were to lie about it later and say something like, oh, I didn't know that was Electro. But the verdict stands, this man tried to electrocute Electro. But then it's from here where Electro more or less tells Hydro Man that they're really the only two out here who are really putting in work against Joe Fixit. So he tells Hydro Man like, hey, we should team up, and Hydro Man agrees. But Wilson Fisk, he doesn't really like the idea of Electro recruiting people because there's a vetting process to the people he hires. But Electro, he really doesn't care. And it's here where he more or less tells the Kingpin that Kevin Durant, Hydro Man, can switch teams as much as he wants. And now Electro's fighting on his own side. And with Electro now separating his ties with the Kingpin, for the time being at least, it's here where he tells Fisk that it's sunset, nighttime, the strip is completely lit up. He then absorbs all of the electricity on the Vegas Strip, which now has Electro supercharged for his next attack, maybe 2, but nonetheless he has to make these hits count. But also in this moment with Electro raising the stakes, Mr. Berenghetti's men ask him if they should get out there and open fire. So Berenghetti asks them, can you assure that you won't hit my customers? And his dudes are like, yeah, absolutely. But then when the lights go out, he's like, how about now? Then his men are like, not so much. But at this point, with Electro supercharged with the current of the entire Vegas Strip running through his body, he strikes Joe Fixit right in the chest, which once again, mind you, Electro is charged up with the power of every light on the Vegas Strip, so it's a lot of juice that he's sending to Joe right now. In this concentrated hit, it's enough to give Joe a heart attack, which then drops Joe seconds later. And after Joe hits the floor, he then goes after Peter, who then dodges Electro's next attack. And with Electro knowing that he just needs one hit on Spider-Man, even if it's a fraction of what he just hit Joe with. But with Peter dodging, Electro's like, what, dodging? Is that the best you can do? And just after saying that, he gets hit from the back by Rhino, who at this point sees Electro as a traitor, with Electro making his own team in the middle of this whole fight. But it's a bit of poetic justice with him making fun of Spider-Man for dodging, when that's the next thing that he should have been doing. But Rhino doesn't stay in the mix too much longer before Hydro Man notices that Rhino had came back, and when Rhino tries to charge at Hydro Man, he just washes him away with the tidal wave, which again is what I was referring to before. Like, you can't just beat Hydro Man with brute force, you gotta be clever about it. But back over with Joe Fixit, with Peter seeing him laid out, he then attempts to give Joe mouth to mouth, and as he does, you can still see the face paint on Peter from the previous issue under his mask. But just before Peter can give Joe CPR, Joe wakes up and he tells Peter that if he kisses him, he gonna rip his head clean off. And you know what? I believe him. But then next, Joe tells Peter to get on his back, cause he has a plan. Cause now with Electro getting ready to strike again, he knows Electro's gonna go for a hit just like the last one, if not a little harder if he can swing it. But also with Electro seeing that Joe Fixit had got up from that last hit, he expresses that he is surprised. But Joe makes it clear that it was his healing factor that allowed the speedy recovery. But then when Electro's like, but Spider-Man doesn't have any healing factor, does he? And for a moment that reminds me of a conversation we had here on the channel years back when I did a comparison between Peter's spider sense and Wolverine's hyper senses. And at the time in the comments, I'd mentioned my theory about Peter's healing factor, which to be clear, he does have, and it is nowhere near Wolverine's. But at the time I made the argument and I still stand by it. But to me, I've always seen Peter as having tougher skin as a part of his power set, which allows him to be more durable and take more of a beating, versus other characters with way better healing factors who are fully regenerating in the middle of a fight. But also with bringing that back up, I'm curious to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. But at this point now with Electro going for another overcharged hit, he charges at Joe and Spidey, and so does Hydro Man. But when they both do, Joe jumps out the way. And in this moment, Hydro Man and Electro both knew that they had messed up. And this collision is enough to knock out the both of them. But with seeing this, Wilson Fisk, he then takes off, because at this point he's more or less come to the conclusion that taking over Michael Berenghetti's business just isn't worth the trouble. But from here, Berenghetti, he then calls damage control to clean the rest of this mess up. And as for Joe, he asks for the rest of the night off so that he can show Spidey a night on the town. And that's pretty much how it wraps up. And I gotta say, like, in hindsight, with this being the end of the 2023 Joe Fixit series, for me, I enjoyed the more introspective moments the most, with us seeing Joe Fixit versus Bruce, and us revisiting Joe's fear of Bruce coming out at the wrong time. And for me, I gotta be honest, that's more of the type of series I would have liked to have seen. And as it stands right now, I haven't heard anything about Peter David giving Joe Fixit a trilogy like he did with Maestro recently, but I really hope that Marvel makes this happen. Because even if Peter David were to tell a story that drifted over into the pages of some of Chris Claremont's writing and sent Joe Fixit over to Madripoor, I wouldn't be upset. And I couldn't imagine that there would be anyone who would not want to see this. But once again, I've heard nothing of this happening, just wishful thinking. But also, I'd like to know what you guys think. Would you like to see a brand new Joe Fixit and Patch series? And who would you choose to write it? Peter David, Chris Claremont? Sky's the limit. I'm just curious to know what you guys think. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/Dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.